In his youth, Palpatine was an ambitious politician from Naboo, renowned for his refined intellect and captivating rhetoric. His discreet connection to the Force was a closely guarded secret, until it was discovered by a Sith Lord who disguised himself as a respected galactic financier. Plagueis offered forbidden teachings on Force manipulation, promising the power to cheat death and shape destiny. Unlike in the movies, Palpatine, curious, accepted the training, but saw the dark side as unbalanced and self-destructive. Secretly, he wanted to understand both sides of the Force in order to achieve something that the Jedi and the Sith ignored: true balance. It was then that he learned what he wanted and devised a subtle plan to free himself from his master. For years, Palpatine feigned loyalty to Plagueis, while planting evidence that suggested the presence of a Sith on Coruscant. In silence, he nurtured doubt in the minds of the Jedi Masters. One day, he gave investigators the precise location of Plagueis, who he believed was safely hidden. The confrontation mission was led by Yoda, who, upon arriving in the dark room, activated his glowing green saber. The confrontation was intense but brief. Plagueis, arrogant in his power, fell before the Jedi Master's unwavering serenity. He never stood a chance against the Master, as his red saber had disappeared and he faced Yoda only with lightning and the use of the Force. Palpatine remained unrecognizable in the plot. He was wise to hide his presence and observe the whole situation from afar. Without his master, Palpatine did not seek to replace the Sith throne. Instead, he returned to Naboo. He used the knowledge he had acquired to guide his actions. He became a senator not by dark manipulation, but of course he used his powers of convincing minds to speed up his victories from time to time. In his proposals, he occasionally struck out against those who commanded many armies or held a lot of power, like the Jedis, for example. He saw himself as a mediator between the stagnant order of the Jedi and the real desires of the people of the galaxy. As he grew politically, Palpatine operated behind the scenes as a kind of gray Jedi. He never declared himself as such, but acted outside the extremes of light and shadow. He kept in touch with Force scholars from different cultures, learning about their alternative methods. He visited the Jedi Temple whenever he could and listened to the Master's explanations, even when he wasn't summoned. He argued that the galaxy should not be governed solely by the dogmas of the Jedi Order. No institution should have a monopoly on morality, he said in public sessions. This stance placed him in a unique position. Neither an ally nor an enemy of the Jedi, but someone who would attack them if necessary. Palpatine believed that the Force was vaster than the Jedi admitted. For him, the Council had locked itself into a paralyzing rigidity. So he used his charisma and subtlety to influence senators, introducing reforms that ran counter to hidden interests. The Jedi watched him with ambivalence. His presence in politics was expanding like a silent gravitational field. The galaxy was beginning to change, and many saw in him a new kind of leader, guided by the Force without declaring himself its servant. For the more experienced senators, Palpatine represented a rare balance between pragmatism and idealism. He brought together allies from different political spectrums. His influence was palpable. When he took over as Chancellor, he did so to public acclaim. His words inspired, but they also made the Jedi Council uneasy. While Yoda respected Palpatine's career, he saw something in his essence that escaped the traditional definitions of the Force. All the Masters could see it. Palpatine didn't hide his power completely this time. He allowed the strongest to perceive a slight connection with the Force. Mace Windu, on the other hand, looked on with growing suspicion. He doesn't seem to be as blessed by the Force, so he's not a threat, and by the time we realized that, he was already a Lord, but I feel he walks between the shadows and the light, Windu once told Yoda. But he hides from us what he really is. Yoda pondered, but refused to act on hunches. To judge without proof is dangerous. To feel we must, not to impose, said the little master. Palpatine, for his part, noticed the Jedi's growing vigilance. He never flouted their rules up front, but he never submitted to them publicly either. Occasional meetings with members of the Order were always cordial, but fraught with tension. He spoke in codes, in symbols, provoking thought without ever exposing himself. The Force does not belong to an order, but to the entire galaxy, he once said to Obi-Wan during a political dinner. Obi-Wan politely nodded, but the phrase stuck in his mind for years. It was the kind of statement that the old masters avoided but could not refute. Palpatine maintained an impressive mastery over his connection to the Force. He knew how to manipulate environments, predict movements, understand intentions, all calmly and without letting anyone notice. He never sought destruction, but reconstruction and control. The galaxy was suffering from bureaucracy and corruption, and he offered an alternative. Not an empire, but a reformed republic. His critics called him a dangerous idealist, his supporters a silent visionary, but none could ignore the fact that his presence altered the political and spiritual balance of the Senate. Over time, the name Palpatine became synonymous with thoughtful but challenging leadership. He never wielded a saber in public, never declared war, and yet he was seen as a force for transformation. Meanwhile, Count Dooku's decision to abandon the Jedi was not motivated by a desire for power, but by deep ideological disappointment. He saw the Republic as corrupt and ineffective, dominated by the interests of corporations and bureaucrats. The galaxy rots while the Jedi meditate, he said. In this scenario, Palpatine tried to act as a mediator between the Senate, which clamored for strength, and the Jedi Order, which still preached caution and wisdom. He attended daily meetings with the High Council, seeking diplomatic alternatives. But as the clashes spread, the senators began to see him as the only one capable of bringing stability. Under pressure, the Senate voted for his almost unanimous re-election as Supreme Chancellor, even before the end of his term, something that deeply displeased the Jedi Council. The Jedi Order was beginning to feel uncomfortable with Palpatine's growing political power. Although there were no clear signs of the dark side in him, his pragmatism, his coldness in the face of war, and his unwillingness to blindly follow the advice of the Jedi generated distrust. Mace Windu warned him in private, "Chancellor, your prolonged stay in power is not in line with democratic principles." Palpatine replied calmly, "Democracy cannot survive without stability, Master Windu. It was the people themselves who voted for me to stay, and you will have to accept that." As Dooku's separatist troops advanced, the Republic increasingly resorted to militarization. The Jedi were forced to lead armies, contrary to their own precepts. Palpatine reluctantly signed emergency decrees to extend the power of the Republican High Command, even authorizing preemptive strikes on certain systems. He believed it was a necessary evil. Peace can only come when extremes are contained, he declared at a meeting of the War Cabinet. But while he acted firmly, the impression grew among the Jedi that the Chancellor wanted to prolong the war in order to consolidate his influence. Meanwhile, Dooku was growing into an icon of resistance for the Separatists. His public speeches, broadcast secretly on several systems, attacked the hypocrisy of the Republic and the supposed connivance of the Jedi with the war. Palpatine, in response, reinforced that the war was the result of Dooku's radicalization. But little by little, the people began to see in the figure of the Chancellor an almost sacred power, as if he were the only wall against chaos. The absence of the dark side as a direct influence in the galaxy led to significant changes in Anakin Skywalker's path. Without the manipulation of Darth Sidious, the young Jedi Knight faced more subtle but equally dangerous internal dilemmas. Palpatine, now re-elected as Chancellor and ever closer to the people, took on the role of informal mentor to Anakin, guiding him with teachings outside of Jedi dogma. "Fear of loss is natural, Anakin. Don't fight it. Understand it. Control it. Peace does not come from denial," Palpatine would say during his meetings with the young Jedi. These words planted the seeds of a gray philosophy, between light and shadow. Anakin, for his part, found in this vision something he had never heard in the halls of the Jedi Temple. The Jedi demanded total detachment from him, even when it meant internal suffering. Palpatine didn't say that he should give in to fear or anger, but instructed him to recognize these emotions as part of himself. "You are no less a Jedi for loving someone. You're more human," he said. The emotional balance that Anakin was beginning to feel made him seek more of this advice, which did not go unnoticed by the Jedi Council. The Masters viewed this relationship with suspicion, especially Mace Windu. The tension grew as Anakin sought his own path. Obi-Wan, still loyal, tried to advise him. "The Chancellor is a wise man, Anakin, but he is not a Jedi. Our doctrines exist for a reason." But Anakin felt suffocated by the Council's judgments. Still, he tried to get help from the Council and spoke of his nightmares about Padmé's death and everything else he was hiding. The Council met and offered help through meditation and spiritual training. But when they found out about his marriage to Padmé and her pregnancy, they decided to exclude him. "You have broken your vows, Anakin. You can no longer be a Jedi. We offer you help, but you will no longer be part of the Order, Skywalker," Windu said regretfully. Rejected, Anakin turned to Palpatine for more sincere advice, and the Chancellor welcomed him every time. One rainy night in the Chancellor's palace, the conversation that would change his life began. Palpatine was waiting for him with a grave look on his face and a low voice. "Did you know, Anakin, that there was a time when I was trained by a Sith Lord?" Anakin remained silent, tense. Darth Plagueis was his name. Powerful master, but arrogant. He thought he could shape life. I abandoned him, but before that I learned a lot. Walking between light and shadow requires balance, not submission. Anakin clenched his fists. "You were a Sith?" Palpatine took a deep breath. "No, I was an apprentice for a time, but I never fully embraced the darkness. I learned as much as I could from both sides only." The young Skywalker was astonished by such frankness. "Why tell me this now?" Palpatine approached him and said calmly, "Because you two walk between two worlds, and you need to understand that wisdom lies not in disowning parts of yourself, but in harmonizing them." This concept struck Anakin deeply. Obi-Wan, having heard almost everything but the part about the Chancellor having been apprenticed to a Sith, tried to intervene. "He's leading you down an unstable path, Anakin. But the Jedi no longer felt part of that world. I no longer belong to the Council, Obi-Wan, but I can still protect the galaxy. I can still be just, and it is Palpatine who is teaching me that." Obi-Wan replied regretfully, "Then tread carefully, my friend." As the months at Palpatine's side passed, the nightmares that had once consumed him began to dissolve. He understood that the fear of loss need not dominate him. In long conversations with Padmé, she gave him strength and faith. "I believe in you, Anakin. You'll find balance." When the time came to give birth, Anakin remained by her side, not as a Jedi, but as a whole man. Padmé survived. The twins were born strong, Luke and Leia. It was at that moment that Anakin decided their fate. They will grow up free, and I'm going to make sure of it. Not by light, not by shadow, but by truth. And I owe it all to the Chancellor. And Palpatine, proud, simply said, "A gray Jedi, a new path opens up." News of the birth of the children spread quickly among Anakin's allies and even among the Jedi of the Order who were beginning to question the dogmas. Over time, Palpatine's speeches were so convincing that even young Jedis fled to hear his words. Palpatine suggested that Anakin lead a new group of guardians, aligned with the philosophy of balance between the two sides. Anakin accepted, and so a new current was born, respected by some Jedi and feared by others because it challenged old traditions. The relationship between the two became more complex. Palpatine, in his reflections, admitted to himself, "He's stronger than I've ever been, because he doesn't fear himself." Anakin, for his part, continued to seek advice. "Chancellor, what if one day I lose that balance?" Palpatine replied calmly, "Then find it again, but don't be alarmed by the lack of control. There is nothing more natural than that." The stability that the Jedi Order had maintained for millennia began to crumble when the pillars of the institution proved increasingly fragile. The rigidity of its teachings, a blind allegiance to the dogma of light and detachment from human emotions, began to be questioned. Palpatine, always attentive to the pulse of the galaxy, observed this phenomenon with a calculating eye. He felt that the real imbalance in the Force did not come from a Sith ascension, but from the dogmatic rigidity of the Jedi. "The Force is not divided. The division is in your mind," he claimed. fueling a subtle campaign to discredit the Jedi Council. He believed that the middle path, the gray path, was the only one that could bring true peace to the galaxy, without the bonds of light or shadow. Palpatine knew that the Council would never accept his vision, so he began a campaign of disinformation, manipulating events and taking advantage of the Jedi's weaknesses. He spread seeds of doubt, highlighting the Order's inability to understand the complexities of the universe. The Jedi are not the guardians of peace. They are prisoners of their own rules. They are unable to see beyond their own code, beyond their own fears. He told the leaders of the galaxy, charming them with his rhetoric. Some younger Jedi in training, initially skeptical, began to question their own beliefs. Inspired by Palpatine's vision and Anakin's example, they deserted the Order and focused on learning Palpatine's teachings. They aligned themselves with neither the light nor the dark side, seeking a more balanced path. Things got out of hand when Palpatine sent Anakin to lead a group of his new followers to hunt down the Separatists and return with Count Dooku's head as proof of their effectiveness. With this new faction forming and going on missions unauthorized by the Jedi Order, and the Jedi Order in crisis, Mace Windu, increasingly alarmed about the direction of the galaxy, made a drastic decision. He believed that Palpatine's rise could not be ignored. This man is corrupting the galaxy. He seeks absolute control, and we as Jedi must act to preserve it. Mace summoned the Jedi Council to act decisively, planning to arrest the Chancellor and end his influence once and for all. However, Yoda, the Order's wisest master, objected. He saw something deeper in the crisis they were facing. Is the Order blind? Right, are the Greys? Something very deep, I sense. Yes, I need to go. Meditating and reflecting is necessary. Yoda withdrew to a neutral place, where he began to meditate deeply, seeking answers in the silence while small conflicts took place between the followers of the Order and the followers of Palpatine throughout Coruscant. Meanwhile, the confrontation between Mace Windu and Palpatine was about to take place. Mace, with his calm and determination, went to the Senate to arrest the Chancellor. But Anakin, now increasingly influenced by Palpatine's philosophy, could not allow this to happen. I can't let the Chancellor be treated like this, Master Windu. He is the leader this galaxy needs, Anakin stated firmly, his gaze determined. Windu, surprised by Anakin's defense, tried to dissuade him. Anakin, you've lost your way. Don't you see what's happening? He's corrupting everything. The fight between the two was intense, but in the end, Anakin prevailed, defeating Mace without killing or seriously injuring him. I can't do that, Mace. I can't let you destroy what Palpatine built. Go back to the temple and take this with you. I don't think I'll need it anymore, Anakin said as he threw his own saber at Mace Windu. Mace Windu returned. He wouldn't attack an opponent without his saber, even if he thought it was powerful. With Anakin's victory, the division among the Jedi became even more evident. Some still believed that Mace Windu was right and continued to support his fight against Palpatine, while others fled, seeking refuge in distant parts of the galaxy. The Jedi Order, now divided, was splintering into several factions. In his speeches, Palpatine spoke of the balance that could be achieved by accepting the complexity of life and the two sides of the Force. He was attracting followers from all over the galaxy. Many saw in Palpatine not just a leader, but a savior who could finally lead the galaxy down a new path. Palpatine's followers, now known as the Greys, began to spread across the galaxy. The Clone Wars, now more complex, became a struggle for control of a divided galaxy. Mace Windu and his allies continued their resistance, trying to form a new coalition against Palpatine's growing power, but the ideological battle was in full swing. The galaxy, now in chaos, awaited the next move. The war began to take on proportions that no one could have predicted. The battlefield was divided, with two opposing sides, one seeking the ancient Jedi ideal and the other trying to impose the philosophy of the Grey Code. On one side were the Temple Jedi, led by Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and other veteran Jedi. On the other side, Palpatine and Anakin Skywalker, now followed by a new generation of Jedi who adhered to the Grey Code, including some of the younger Jedi who had lost faith in the rigidity of the Order. To complete Palpatine's army, The clones, now under his command, were fighting alongside the Greys in a war for the galaxy. The ensuing clash would be more than a war of swords, but a philosophical struggle that divided the Force itself. So after many more physical and political clashes, the two armies met on the streets of Coruscant. The battles began and turned the streets and skies of the planet city into pure chaos. "We cannot allow the galaxy to be lost in chaos, Anakin," Mace Windu said, his voice deep and firm. "You have to understand that this path you have chosen will lead everyone to ruin. It's too late to change." Anakin, with his new gray lightsaber in hand, looked at Mace with an intensity that could cut through the Force itself. "What you don't understand, Mace, is that the galaxy needs balance, not dogma. The dark side is not the answer, nor is pure light. The middle is the only path we can follow." Obi-Wan was in the middle of the two and tried to contain them, but the code put him on Windu's side, and so it would be 2 against 1. The tension between the three of them was at its peak. "This time I'm not going to go easy on you, Anakin," Mace said regretfully, raising his purple lightsaber, ready for battle. Obi-Wan also activated his and once again asked Anakin to stop, but Anakin replied, "The Force is more complex than you think. I am more than Palpatine's own chosen one. I am the balance, and the balance will always prevail." The clash between the sabers was like the crash of thunder, and the power of the opposing forces echoed across the battlefields. "Let's end this, Anakin," Mace said, more aggressive than before, advancing with renewed force. "If I can't save you, then you'll have to be stopped. Then I'll stop Palpatine's madness." Obi-Wan leapt behind Anakin and the sabers began to slash. The fight between the three was intense, and Mace's fury seemed increasingly unbeatable. Anakin used the Force to hurl objects at Obi-Wan and leapt to slash Mace unprotected. But Obi-Wan dodged and stepped forward to block each of Anakin's attacks on his fellow member of the Order. Suddenly, with a ferocious movement, Mace cut off Anakin's arm, tearing it from his body and leaving him wounded on the ground. "You forced me into this, Anakin," Mace said, panting, as his lightsaber hovered over Anakin's head, ready for one last blow. However, Obi-Wan quickly intervened, raising his blue saber and blocking Mace's blow. "Mace, no, not like this. He's still my brother. We can't do that. It's over here and he'll live. But our real enemy is the Chancellor." Obi-Wan's decision was crucial, but the tension between them was beyond repair. Meanwhile, Palpatine, with his calm and smiling demeanor, advanced through the battle. He revealed to everyone his fighting skills and impeccable control of the Force. Fighting with mastery and a chilling coolness, he pushed his way through while slashing and destroying his enemies. His red saber, stolen from his master in his final moments, gleamed as he cut through the Jedi who opposed him. War, my friends, is not just about who wins. It's about understanding the true nature of the Force. Today's battles are a necessary sacrifice for what is to come, Palpatine said, his voice laden with conviction. His fighting style was unique, fluid and precise, and his ability to manipulate the Force was frightening. In the space of a few minutes, he took down a handful of Jedi, leaving a trail of destruction wherever he went. "True freedom lies in the acceptance of balance," he kept saying, like a preacher who believed in what he was saying. Mace Windu saw everything and turned to Palpatine himself, accompanied by Obi-Wan. "You will have to answer for your crimes, Palpatine. The time has come to put an end to this," Mace said with authority. The fight between the three was a spectacle of skill and brute force, with sabers colliding with energy blasts. "You're just a puppet, Mace, and you're more lost than Anakin was when he found me, Obi-Wan," Palpatine retorted, smiling. "You'll never understand that, in the end, the Force will always choose me." The three of them seemed unstoppable, and the battle intensified by the second. Mace Windu used heavy, powerful blows that he had learned when using the Vapad. Palpatine used lightning and threw large structures using the Force, and Obi-Wan concentrated on blocking the Chancellor's most dangerous attacks. The three of them were on another level and showing their maximum abilities, until, in a moment of pure destruction, Obi-Wan was knocked off the structure and fell hundreds of meters away. Then Mace and Palpatine realized that it would now be just the two of them, and they faced each other in a final and extremely dramatic blow on top of Coruscant's tallest tower. Mace's saber cut through Palpatine's chest, while Palpatine's saber hit Mace straight in the heart. Both fell to the ground at the same time, killed by the blades they had used to fight. The war had reached its climax, but now both sides were without their greatest leaders. Obi-Wan, standing and still breathing hard, watched everything from afar. His heart was heavy with the loss of both men. "No, it shouldn't have ended like this," he muttered, the words coming out sadly. The war had taken so much. He looked at the streets and skies of Coruscant and saw only death and destruction. How did it come to this? It was then that a silent but immensely powerful presence appeared on the battlefield. Master Yoda, with his infinite wisdom, appeared after having meditated for a long time on the events that had unfolded. He observed what remained of the war and, with a deeply sad look on his face, raised his hands. The battlefield seemed to calm down as the Force reacted to his presence. With just his hand gestures and his eyes closed, he was able to control and bring down every saber and blaster being used in the battle. By wisdom, the war is over, yes. In balance, the Force must live on, Yoda said, his voice carrying immense weight. Everyone felt the intensity of 1,000 years of experience. With the wisdom of the Force, we have decided, all of us. The middle way, the acceptance of the Grey philosophy to allow we must, Yoda declared. He raised his hands, and an indescribable power of the Force enveloped everyone present. What seemed to be the end of an incessant war was, in fact, the beginning of a new era. In balance, Jedi and Greys, united they must be. In the middle, peace will be found. And so, with these words and a gigantic demonstration of the Force, Yoda brought an end to the war. The city was devastated, but now with a new purpose, it would begin to rebuild under the watchful eye of the wisest master who ever lived. Anakin recovered and made peace with Obi-Wan after suffering for a long time over the loss of the Chancellor. He then returned to Padme, Luke, and Leia and watched the children grow up as Anakin shared both the knowledge he had learned from the Jedi and from Palpatine. The Jedi Council saw when the Grey Temple was erected, and as part of its members chose to learn the teachings that Anakin shared. Both forces learned to coexist, and it was only a matter of time before the Separatist Union was extinguished and the galaxy could breathe again.